So if you're a parent paying child support to the other parent, there are a number of reasons why you might want to go into court and modify that child support, seek a reduction in child support. The top reason is a decrease in your earnings or a loss of your job. It's important to remember that the court cannot go back and retroactively modify your child support past the date that you file a petition to modify. So if you lose your job in January, but you wait until July before you go back to court and ask the court to modify your child support, it can't go back to the date that you lost your job. It can only go back to July, which is the date that you filed your petition. So it's very important to be proactive. I've had many guys that wait too long. They end up getting a contempt petition filed against them, and then they file their petition to modify. But the court cannot modify it back to the date you lose your job, only the date that you file your petition. So keep that in mind. Guys, girls, be proactive on this. If you're paying child support to the other parent of your child, there are a number of reasons why you may want to modify that child support. We've been over the number one reason, and that's the loss of a job or decrease in earnings. The number two reason is that the child turns 18 or 21 in some states, ages out, and there's no longer a child support obligation. In those situations, you've got to be proactive. Don't assume that the court's keeping up with your kid's age. Usually they don't. The judge doesn't look at these files, doesn't review them, periodically. So you need to be proactive and go to court and make sure that the court knows that that child is aged out and you no longer owe child support for that child. Now, sometimes you've got more than one child you're paying child support for, but when one of the children ages out, many times that justifies going to court and modifying to reduce the child support. If you got 3 kids that you're paying child support for and one ages out, now you only got 2 that you got to pay child support for, and that'll reduce your burden. If you're paying child support to the other parent, there's often a need to modify that child support when situations change. We've been over the first 2 in previous videos. The first one is a reduction in your income or loss of job. The second one is the child turns 18 or 21 in some states. The third reason that we're going to talk about in this video is that the child has moved in with you and is no longer living with the other parent. When that happens, you have an increased financial burden, and you need to go to court and let the court know that, hey, things have changed. The kid's now living with me. Now, you'll probably also need to file a petition to modify the parenting plan to switch custody from the other parent to you. But when you do that, the court needs to know that you should no longer owe child support to the other parent, and in fact, the other parent should be paying you child support. I can't tell you how many times I have represented clients where there's been an informal agreement to change custody, but the parent that gets custody is still having to pay child support. And if they stop paying child support because they've now got the child without getting a court order, then they can be held in contempt, and they're still going to be responsible for that child support that they were required to pay, even though the child is living with them. Very important to be proactive on this one. If you're paying child support to the other parent, there's often a need to reduce that child support, to ask for a modification. We've been over the top 3 reasons why people ask for modifications. Number 1 was the fact that you've lost your job and have a reduction in income. Number 2, the child has turned 18. Number 3, the child has come to live with you. Number 4 reason that we're going to talk about today is my big pet peeve. The child is no longer in daycare and doesn't have those costs anymore. In many states, daycare costs are included in child support, work-related daycare costs. So if the other parent is working and puts the child in daycare and that costs money, say $1,000, well, you may end up having to pay a portion of that, $500, $600, $700, depending on what the income breakdown is. And if you're doing that, then that continues. That's part of child support. It doesn't stop automatically. So when that child leaves daycare, you're going to continue to pay that $700. It's going to continue to come out of your check until you go to court and say to the judge, hey, this child is no longer in daycare. I shouldn't have to pay these extra expenses. But you got to be proactive. If you're not, you could end up paying daycare costs until the kid turns 18. You could end up paying in excess of $100,000 over the life of a child in daycare costs that don't exist. So be proactive and keep that in mind. If you're obligated to pay child support to the other parent, there often comes a time where you're going to need to reduce that child support. Well, today we're going to talk about the 5th reason why you would want to go to court and modify your child support downward. We've talked about in previous videos the first four. Number one is a loss of income or loss of job. Number two is the child has turned 18. Number three is the child moves in with you and leaves the other parent. The number four reason, my pet peeve, is that the child is no longer in daycare and there are no longer work-related daycare expenses. Today we're going to talk about number five, and that is that the other parent's income has increased. Now, many states use what's called an income shares model, where they look at both parents' incomes to determine what child support is. Now, if the other parent's income goes down and yours stays the same, then you're going to have an increase in child support. If the other parent's income goes up and yours remains the same, then you should conversely get a decrease in child support. But you got to be proactive. It doesn't happen automatically. In all of these situations, you've got to file a petition. So as soon as you find out that the other parent is making more money, then file a petition. Go back to court and ask the court to reduce your child support obligation. If you don't do that, then you're going to end up paying more than you should.